Thank you so much for coming and for the opportunity to share a little bit more on research. So I am planning to share a summary of what the dissertation was about, and also about the current plans, and that can be more unstructured opinions in general. So very briefly, I'm going to tell you what is the need related to coexistence between people and the cats in Costa Rica. What has been done, what I did through 3 studies, and what were the main lessons, and where are we now. The research need I am trying to attend is how these protected areas are islands, surrounded by private properties, but still in those properties there is wildlife that we need to account for, and the landscape becomes complex when livelihoods and productive animals are around all the productive activities. And when wildlife is moving through those complex landscapes, then the proximity for interactions is going to increase, and the interactions can be both positive and negative, and that depends on what are the interests of the stakeholders in these landscapes. Because this is what we are finding. We are finding attacks to livestock, even the family dog, and that is very shocking for part of the stakeholders involved, specifically the rural livestock producers and people surrounding the protected areas. And we're finding big cats that are endangered being killed very frequently. So one sector of society is very concerned about the status of these predators, trying to save them, to protect them, and forcing laws about the welfare of this species. But other sector is feeling the costs of coexisting with the animals. And what has been done, it's about the technical management with preventive measures to coexist with these cats, trying to adapt the husbandry practices. But the recommendations are usually directed to an average rancher, not considering really the complex of socio-economical situations. And it is very inefficient in the sense that you have to go one ranch at a time and provide the alternatives for the cats not to be killed. And also, in other places, the mitigation measures, referring that to trying after the damage occurs to make it tolerable. It's mostly about using financial incentives. People is going to ask, are you going to pay for the cow that was killed? And that is supposed to solve the problem. But when you do that in certain studies with other predators in other countries, what is being created is a negative attitude that the predator, the endangered animal, is a cost for you, so I'm going to replace that cost. And never those incentives try to really change that vision of what a predator is. And also the incentives that get perverse, that would be economical terms, that you're not obtaining actually the conservation product or outcome that you want, but what you're paying is for a dead cow, so you're going to get more dead cows. And instead of stopping the damage, you're actually incentivizing, not preventing. And there are many measures that you can do. For example, in here you see electric fences, water buffaloes are defensive animals in general, different night enclosures, preventing poaching. Those are some of the most recommended measures to coexist with the big cats. And projects, what they are trying to do is integrative of several disciplines, are saying, well, it's good to manage the environment and good to manage the cats per se, but also you need to manage people, because the conflict is usually not about the predation event of losing the dog or losing the cow, but what is happening after, when people is looking for help or looking into the communities for different opinions, and some people say, no, I don't feel it, I love the cat, or saying, oh yes, you should get rid of those pests. So it's more about those human factors that we are dealing in the field. The programs that are trying to be that integrative have several elements in common. For example, trying to have this multi-stakeholder involvement. And in my research, I was thinking, so if we try to do this, are we sharing the same views, or is that part of the problem, that the stakeholders are just not talking the same languages? Other characteristics require bottom-up governance, not the government saying what to do, but the locals being able to manage and be responsible for the resources. And in that case, I was asking in the research if the main stakeholder, as it would be the ranchers, the livestock producers, if they are a homogeneous group or not, or if we have different views from that bottom. Another element, it would be the promotion of pro-coexistence behaviors. That would be trying to make people adopt those changes in how to live with the predators, those practices that make people tolerant and perceive less damage. And in that sense, I was wondering, well, how can we really be strategic based on all those characteristics? The goals for the dissertation I did were first to identify those points of common ground and differences in the views of all people involved in these conflicts, specifically in the prevention of the damage by Jaguars and Pumas. And also understanding better the sector of the ranchers, making profiles or types that we can identify and target better in programs. And as the third objective, I wanted to design solutions in a very participatory manner, so we can detect all those critical points where a program should be strong or be threatened a weakness in the plan. In the first study called Barriers, Benefits, and Motivations for Prevention, then it was an exploration of the views of these stakeholders. So it was a research using focus groups interviews, and we had groups with ranchers, with government officials, and also with colleague researchers. That was in 2013. And we did well, very dynamic activity that is using the nominal group technique. So having a small group, you can ask for individual input, but also the group is going to build a different knowledge, and they are going to end with a ranking. So you can actually get a result of what were the important matters discussed that day in a group. And this is just the still part of what I found on the benefits for ranchers. When we ask about what is the benefit for a rancher to use preventive practices, the first thing is always thinking on money. But also, very interestingly, the ranchers were actually, this is comparing the ranchers with researchers and officers. The ranchers were saying that for them it is also important, the social interactions and the emotional benefits. That was not mentioned by either group, external stakeholders, let's call it that way. And when thinking in barriers, again, money first is the thought, and also the lack of support of institutions. But it is interesting how researchers and officers were saying it's the resistance to change from the ranchers, but the ranchers are saying we feel frustrated and we cannot understand the responsibilities from all those involved. So this is part of what we found. On the deeper motivations to adopt these practices, we found a very a pattern, but also we found that for ranchers, it is sorry, a lot about the actual damage and the everyday experience of having the cat and suffering the damage that is going to make them use these practices. And that is the opposite we found when we asked, well, what is the factors that motivate that you do not use the practices? And they said, well, not having the damage, we're not going to do anything. So it's not a real preventive philosophy. And there are other things that were common, but for example, the characteristics of the ranch are important for many of the stakeholders, but more important for the ranchers than for researchers and officers in this part of motivation. Sorry. And well, to close this part, what we found is this prevalence of financial ideas in the mind of people. So that's very fixed, but also can be a bias for accepting alternatives. It's always asking for money and not thinking what else can we do. And we found that it is very prevalent that the actions are being taken after the damage happened. The importance of social interactions may be something to take into account in projects. And we also found those personal cognitive processes that are usually ignored in projects about the norms, the control people feel over what is going on, the values, the emotions, and also contextual factors of the topography, how the landscape is, how big the farmland is. That's going to be important too. In conclusion, the common ground of the stakeholders is economy or finances in general. Opposing views, more important would be the relationships and the personal issues. Trying to make people be preventive constantly, it's going to be very difficult. This cognitive approach of not ignoring the psychology of what is in the mind of the ranchers is a need. And well, in that case, I was recommending the theory of planned behavior as a theoretical framework to work with. And that's what I did in the second study, that it was called a typology of ranchers coexisting with Jaguars and Pumas in Costa Rica. So using this theory, I tried to develop, well, and adding those elements we found in the previous study, the emotional factor, also the contextual factors. I tried to make a hypothesis of what would be the types of ranchers, some emotional, some perception-driven, attitude-driven, social-driven, control-driven, and context-driven ranchers. And let's see how that works on the field. Because we went and did interviews, semi-structured interviews to a random sample. We had a list of affected ranchers throughout the country and went to a sample of 180 and tried to pair each of those with an unaffected neighbor. For the analysis, it was several steps for a clustering analysis. I'm not going to go through that. And we found that, well, the final sample size was 162. Half of those interviewees, they were using at least one method of prevention. Mostly it was the night enclosure. The affected ranchers, as we would imagine, they prevent more. And they also had higher scores for the intention to use preventive practices, for the attitudes, for the control. And they have bigger farms and farther from towns. And those ranchers that are unaffected, they showed higher negative emotions. That has been a pattern in several studies. Actually, without that more close interaction with a predator, they are going to have more negative emotions. Well, this is the clustering patterns, that it was a pretty well clustering process. and we found a typology. Let's see. In the first place, we got a group that would be the helpless ranchers. In that case, they scored low in the intention, the attitudes, and the perceived behavioral control. Only 25% actually prevent the damage. And few have received support. Mortality rate is similar among the three groups in the beginning. This different. The second group is the opposite pattern. We have the people that have a good intention to prevent, and they have a good attitude. They feel the norms are important, and they feel under control of preventing. They have the highest willingness to collaborate, and that may be also a pattern of bias because they have been receiving 62% have received some support. And let's see, we have the cat negative ranchers. I think I changed that name in the publication. I'm about to present, but those ranchers are strongly based on their emotions, the negative emotions toward the cat. So they are very angry, and they fear the cats and perceive higher risk to people mostly. They don't want to collaborate with conservation, but more than half they are preventing damage. So it's a very different pattern, and they have the lower annual income and tend to have the lower education. In this case, it's the group that has the least mortality, so they are not suffering so many attacks, and they have not much intention to prevent damage. Only a few have received support, and they are actually closest to town and have the highest income and the longest time living in the property. So this is the pattern we found of 4 very different rancher groups. The theory in general was very useful for detecting these types. And now each of these profiles can be targeted in very different scenarios of maybe communication or education, or what they actually need to make those changes, behaviors we need. And well, let's see, because with all that information that we produce in those studies, we passed through a very ambitious and tough project that it was a participatory design of incentives to coexist with the big cats in Costa Rica. The objectives here were to integrate the views of many people to make a plan, okay, where we want to go now, and identify all the discussion points. We did an adaptation of a Delphi process that is structured communication, where we had steps, rounds of consultation. So a first step was to have a local stakeholder workshop. It was 21 leaders and effect ranchers from 7 communities, different parts of the country. They traveled to the University of Costa Rica, and we had this great workshop during a weekend. Next, based on their first draft proposal, we took the results into a questionnaire, online questionnaire for a panel of experts. So we had 25 experts from different disciplines, even some international experts, so they could criticize and add and take off parts. And they did that twice to refine the ideas. And we finished with a multi-stakeholder validation that was going this time to each of the 7 communities, and then have there a workshop, open doors, bring in the community there, key people around, so they could say, okay, we like or we do not like what the expert said. And they built all the proposal over a logical framework approach, creating objectives and indicators and all the activities, and we tracked all the ideas produced. So it was a joint effort of many people there. And well, I'm not going to go through, but we tried through these rounds of consultation to go through how it is supposed to flow the participatory decision making from an initial situation to a divergence of ideas, then avoiding much of the conflict by having this process of rounds like you can improve, you still can improve, and build on every of the rounds to get to convergence and make decisions at the end. So we started with several ideas produced in the first round, and some were merged, some were eliminated, others were just refined to end with 6 different objectives in this project. That well, this chart is like showing an evolution, how in the initial discussion the ideas of what to do were there, but the criticisms were arising or making some consensus. And then in the discussion, those that are highlighted are the points that I consider more critical or with more polemic. For example, trying to balance the interest of human and wildlife. Some people were saying this project is too much about the human part. So, and yeah, but then the goal was trying at the end to be more balanced. Build social trust with inclusion and equity. So that's unusual, but we had in the panel anthropologists and sociologists and ecologists, and they try to be very clear about that part. Quality control for honesty, about all the trying to improve communication. That was one of the main concerns. It's okay, if we are going to improve communication, we need some kind of quality control. One of the incentives is a green label for products and services in the communities. So a lot of discussion was about if the project is competent, if it is about conservation, why is it going to work with developing things for production? So some people is still resisting the idea of conservation working for development. And in this case, it's not really a marketing tool yet. It's just to build a community identity. It is a community that coexists with people. This is the technical assistance for ranchers. It is in the present. There's a group called the Unit for Attention of Conflicts in the government. That they are giving this technical assistance, going to the farms and trying the ranchers to adopt the practices. But in our discussion, they were saying, but the ranchers were saying, we want to be involved in the evaluation and learning how this is done, and we would like to balance the paternalism versus that the locals do not want to be left alone and abandoned. So that was part of the discussion. Other part, payment for environmental services. In that case, the discussion is about how to really produce biodiversity instead of just try to set something punitive, try to make them collaborative, but that's still under work. And well, a lot of discussion, and the polemic was not over for deciding if we could use livestock insurance or compensation of losses. We couldn't solve it because some people in the panel and in the local part, they were saying we should not use at all this kind of incentives. Other people was strongly in favor, and we had to be Solomonic and said, okay, we need more research on this part and test that in the future. Well, in here you can see the six parts, because we have established an organization of communities at the national level that coexist with big cats. So build those groups more organized. In Costa Rica, they love organizations, not all work very well, but it gives power to the people. And in the workshop, for example, they were very, very surprised to see how other communities were sharing the same problems under different contexts. But the participants, they even created a WhatsApp group, and they keep in touch and send pictures from one community to other, and they complain how the cat is around, and that is building in these people a sense of togetherness. Creation of options for communication. So in that, the idea would be to have variety of media. WhatsApp, they were saying a lot of electronics are now available for a rancher really in remote areas, but others were saying that some people is not able to read, so maybe informal meetings once a month with the community, taking the coffee and talk and something. And try also that the local and the government and some other managers involved would be close enough to ask for help or support in general. The technical assistance, I mentioned that we changed the focus, so now it is about citizen science. So it's what we're trying to build now, the green label for products and services, the payment for reduction of biodiversity, and the evaluation of alternatives. These are some measures we did to validate what we were doing, the agreement we were looking in a voting process during the discussions. People was able to vote if they were in favor or not of each of the ideas, of the objectives. And consensus of how many of the stakeholders were voting in favor or against a different part of the plan. So you can see for this one, the agreement was not that good. And previously, the experts were in the round 3 in the previous draft of the proposal, and the final part was for consensus. So those were the 7 communities participating, so very varied geographically in the north, in the south, in the central part of the country. And well, from the voting, we asked also if they were going to be part of a pilot test of the project. So only one of the communities in the Peninsula de Osa, the south part, they said, no, we prefer not to participate because in here many groups have fast and promised things, and then they leave and they're very bored. But don't forget about us. They said, we want to know how the other communities go, and then in the future we think what. And if you know that part of the country, many NGOs and many government projects have been around, not much has changed. We also asked for those that wanted to be part, well, not for all of them, if they consider the quorum in those workshops to be representative. So we have no idea how to measure representativeness of participants. We asked them if they consider the group to be representative. So we found some of the communities saying, no, in here the ranchers are missing, or not enough people could make it. So we got those results too. And after the research, actually, we went again to those communities and asked why people was not attending the previous workshop. So this process allows us to make this plan of incentives. And what we got is this plan that is a package of incentives. And the idea would be to match each incentive to the type of rancher that can need that the most. And in here you can see the volunteers, and these are the inspiring cats. And the ranchers and community leaders for the workshop that was in May last year. And well, so to answer the questions I was making, we saw that stakeholders are not in the same page because the views of what is going on is simplified or misinterpreted. A lot of things are about financial motivation, but there's more on the social interactions and personal motivations. On the heterogeneity, now we can say, okay, we have different types of people. We cannot summarize things assign the same recipe for all. And about the strategic part, well, now we know those critical points that still need more discussion, or that we need to be very aware when we implement the plans. So after the research, what has been done? These are parties. We had in the 4th of July, the day of the wildcat. That is the 3rd year. That this celebration is the National Day of the Wildcat. But usually that is only celebrated in the University of Costa Rica, inviting some people. So it's for us, the people that love cats, a party for them. This is the first time the community have that party in their town. And we did a crowdfunding to get money for this, and the community, they use funds from what they have already. And it was very simple in some communities, just a lunch with some families. They could not bring more people, but in other communities it was a really big party, especially those two, and they liked to party, so they had karaoke, we did bingo with a lot of prizes, and well, football couldn't miss, and it was a lot of fun. Also, I have new volunteers. Every year I try to recruit volunteers, and this year I got the maximum I ever had, so the group of 30 people. And they are the strength of the projects we do. And after that, at least people that never knew or never participated in previous activities, they were there and said, oh, but I cannot understand what is this party about. At the end, they were like very curious about the process, because we were not giving talks or nothing. It was just the party. But the locals were making toasts. For example, in a couple of the parties, they were, or at the end, they were saying, thank you for coming, because this and this. So the local leaders, they were, well, the hosts, they were explaining to the rest of the community what the party was about. And, well, we just started the new phase of the research, that is, this was an opportunity to make a forum in the University of Costa Rica. This is the Vice Minister of Environment, and she has been involved in the panel of experts, and she was very kind to attend. We got also in that discussion the person in charge of development of the payment for environmental services, that they are looking for innovations, and they are trying a similar measure of biodiversity to see how they can make operational such a payment. We got the representative of the Direction for Community Development, and this lady was representing the Livestock Corporation. So it was a very unusual panel, and we got this brave lady, representative of the community. So first the institutions were giving their speeches, saying how much they help the environment and they care about sustainability and that they are very committed. The questions we were discussing were about balancing conservation and development. The questions arrived from the critical point findings. And the speeches were really interesting, but too serious. And the lady took the microphone and went one by one saying why the institutions were wrong. And saying, okay, it's very hard when you do the policies from your desk. Go to visit us, and we are not in the livestock associations because we are too little, we have not many cows. And our communities are very, very small. She was coming from the smaller community that they are not allowed by the law to make the association, but they still have one informal association, and then it's very difficult for them to get some funding to do whatever they want, the football course or some event. To the Minister of Environment, she was saying, we know how park rangers are in need and how they are doing their best, because we are the ones taking medicine to the park ranger when he is just taking care of the station, because he cannot go around, he's alone, he has to stay in the station because if not, someone is going to make some damage. And for the payment of environmental services, the previous speech was like, in your communities, there is so many hectares of this benefit. And she was saying, okay, who is the owner of those hectares? Is the foreign people that is buying land, and the locals that are really small piece of land, they are not receiving anything, and it's not sustainable at all. So it was a very interesting experience for them to be exposed to this kind of situation, and then they approach and offer help. So let's see if that remains for the months that come. Here I wanted to show you very briefly. Are we okay with time? This is a video we presented in that forum, but it's in Spanish, so you will have to guess. Homemade. It's featuring the voices of the locals. Sí.
Pero, ¿qué puede pasar cuando hay en los vecindarios?
Más o menos como era, como
por la montaña, se oía todo el camino, yo sobre la montaña, hasta que terminó el río, ahí nos dejó. Bueno, pequeñito, ¿verdad? Pero sí, pero fue una experiencia, ¿verdad? Que nunca, no se lo voy a
las escuelas son, y aunque algunas son, tanto para los las comunidades. Opinando cuando comunidades tienen apoyo para convertir la construcción en fuente de desarrollo local. Diálogo, asistencia, reconocimiento y producción de una identidad forman parte de los incentivos propuestos por locales y expertos. Llegó el momento de ponernos a prueba. Llegó la hora de convivir con personas.
It's time to test the incentives, and it's time to coexist with big cats. Let's illustrate a little bit of the work was. So in this new project that I entitled it Community-Based Management of Jaguars and Pumas by Means of Incentives for Coexistence, we are starting by knowing better the communities because we have been there, but it's amazing when we really walk around. Suddenly we know of more people and more houses that were out of view, and we do not want to exclude anyone. So first we were making a list of all the people living there. They use that as a sampling framework for interviews. And we have been exploring around, looking for where the cats are passing through the communities. They call that the pasadas, the paths, where you can see the cat enter into ranches or going through a town. Some they said it's in the middle of town that is passing. In the video, that guy is showing the way in my front. The door, the dog was attacked twice, that survivor dog. And it's, in some communities, often, in others, it's more rare. And we are also approaching the authorities in each of the regions, Ministry of Environment and this Direction of Community Development, mostly, but still trying to make more alliances. And we just started the new part of interviews. But yeah, what we are doing now is research design that we selected 4 of the communities. Those that decided to work in the pilot test, and one that is the most difficult one is going to be the control community. And try to apply different incentives to each for 1 year, and then the next year we're going to switch the incentives, the treatment, to the other communities, and then measure different indicators. Some will be through the interviews using the model of wildlife acceptance capacity. So we're measuring if acceptance changes in time, if the benefits and the risks changes through the incentives. We're using an index to measure the features or the characteristics of the different incentives. And the idea would be that to assess change through this implementation. And in the biological part, we're going to use camera trapping. Camera trapping in the community that is going to receive the payment for environmental services is going to be done by the communities. The camera traps are going to be donated to the communities, and they are going to learn how to use them, how to map information, and the idea would be the payment should be received by the community for community projects. And in the case of the community receiving incentive of the green label, they are going to receive training on creation of different products if they already have cheese or some kind of handicraft, or the touristic service that already exists there, that we create a label and they can use that and try to market that, but also they realize our product is for the community, cats, and try to make some marketing in their minds more than the real market. But still, that has the potential to grow anymore. And in that case, some friends of these, well, obviously for Jan and Schiffer, they have the project of the certification, Jaguar friendly certification. That's also a pilot test, so we plan to compare with them. We're talking with they're more advanced in Colombia, but in Costa Rica, we're going to test that too. And for the payment for environmental services, we're also talking with people that is the one in charge of the payment for forest services, for carbon sequestration. But they have also a fund that is called the Biodiversity Fund. It's a trust fund, very, very big today. But the problem is that they still are figuring out how to measure biodiversity production. And the other community that is going to receive technical assistance, so the idea would be the officers of this trained unit of attention of conflicts. They have been trained by Pantera Foundation, and they have all the materials and all the PowerPoint presentations of how to train others. So what we are talking with this unit is that the officer comes to the community and try to recruit locals to be part of the team. And if they in very close communication, if they hear about some damage to a cow, to a horse, and assess the situation, and that's going to help relieve a little bit of the work of these officers that are really saturated with other activities and are very slow sometimes to go to the events. And have a really situation very difficult with that control community. We want to have it as control, but they are actually the more active Jaguar killers. So maybe we will have to do something there. We are trying with the conservation area to make the officials to really go through those cases, so be the ones in something. See how that works. It's very tough. Sorry. Do you have any question? Because I was improvising most of it.
I have a question.